Today we're very honored indeed to be speaking with Dr. Paul House. Dr. House serves as professor of Old Testament at Beeson Divinity School and in 2012 served as the president of the Evangelical Theological Society. He is the author of several books including Old Testament Theology and the book that we'll be discussing today, Bonhoeffer's Seminary Vision, A Case for Costly Discipleship and Life Together. Dr. House, thank you for being with us.
It's an honor. Thank you.
Dr. House, you open your book with a quotation from Dietrich Bonhoeffer that theological education is, quote, worthy of our ultimate commitment. But seminaries today, as you know much better than many of us, face an enormous number of problems, from rising financial pressures to possible lawsuits over accreditation. You've been involved in theological education for some time now, 3 decades. What are the challenges and the real opportunities that are facing institutions of theological education today?
Well, I think the big challenge is to keep our focus, because we let all the other challenges deter us from our focus. Our focus is to shape and form serious shepherds for God's people. And it is not our job primarily to provide teaching that the churches have left out, or to become a Christian college of sorts. We have many good ones of those, but is to keep the focus on how can we best shape God-called, Spirit-filled, dedicated people and shaping them for ministry. And I think one of the problems, of course, is finances. I believe we do need a strong commitment from our churches, the people who send and receive pastoral candidates. I think that's going to be an ongoing need. We're going to need good funders, friends for seminaries. But I also think we have to wake up to the fact that some of our models have created some of these problems, and to deal with some of those problems seriously.
I teach at Moody Bible Institute, and some of the hallway conversations center around the question of whether we're staying true to our roots of being a Bible college as opposed to maybe drifting towards some sort of liberal arts model. Anyway, I think those hallway conversations take place at other institutions too. In your view, what is the distinct role of the seminary, and how is that different from perhaps a liberal arts college?
Yes, I can't speak for all the liberal arts colleges out there. I have taught in them. I am aware of them, but I know each one has their own local flavor and its own local faculty and its own local job to do. Spokane and Chicago being very different places, as you would well know. But it seems to me like a seminary is to receive people who are firm believers in Jesus Christ. No question about that, and they've proven that. But then second of all, they have a specific call to pursue ministry as their vocation, as what they're going to do with their lives. They may do other jobs to support that vocation. They may have lots of other things, but they see themselves as primarily a pastor teacher for God's people. The church would help us know that they are really, truly called and that they've shown gifts of that the churches who send them may have heard them preach or teach, may have seen them visit the sick, may have seen them disciple someone, may have been helped to understand what ministry looks like. And then they would come as learners into a community of fellow students, learners, under the helping hand of teachers, staff members, administrators who are also sent by the churches for this task. Always with the idea that we're trying to shape people that we would want to teach us, our children, our grandchildren, the scriptures, and to model Christ-likeness for them. Now you'll notice the focus here is not on sending as many people as we possibly can for whatever reason they wish to come, and to see what they might learn and then see how many might go into ministry. One thing I do know about funding is we cannot afford to try to do this anymore. The resources need to be focused. I think a Bible college such as Moody is, and several of your graduates from Chicago branch who have come to us in Birmingham, does a great job of taking a young person who wants to be shaped as a Christian and filling their hearts and minds and hands with love for Christ and work for Him. In our culture, however, it's fairly rare to find as many 18 to 22-year-olds who are as firm in their commitment of knowledge, of knowing their vocation, as we might like. However, there are a lot of Christians by the time they're 22 do know. And so I think there is some wisdom in saying, here's someone with a background, here's someone who's had a chance to decide to do something else, but have been called and tested. And now the church asks us to shepherd them for a while, not to credential them, not to simply give them some more lectures, but to help shape them in community with people who care about them, and to partner with churches to help them be ready for their first or second ministry. Lots of ways to do that, as I say in the book. I don't think there's only just one pattern. But when we lose our focus that that's what we're trying to do, we say, well, the government loans us money, so we better do it this way, and they tell us how to credential and what they'll pay for. Therefore, we will only do it this way and offer these kinds of degrees. Well, then we've let the funding get out in front of the focus, rather than say, here's the focus. This is what we're asking people to fund, and this is what we're going to try to do.
Dr. House, thank you for that reflection. Bonhoeffer's seminary met at 4 locations in the 5 years that it was in operation from 1935 to 1940, as you chronicle in your book. And you describe the rather severe conditions that the seminary endured during this time until the Gestapo finally shut the operation down in 1940. You give a beautiful portrait of the day-to-day life of the seminarians in this operation. What are some of the differences that struck you as you were preparing this book between Bonhoeffer Seminary and the seminary of today?
Yeah, I want to be precise about how you started the question.
Yes.
In one place for 2.5 years, and then he met in 2 places for 2 years, and then back in one place for a half a year. So there weren't 4 of them running simultaneously at any time. I just wanted to clarify that. So his idea was to have a unique community in a place that they then minister to. There's several differences with the students. 1, they were all single. 2, they were all male. 3, they had all had a university bachelor's program, we'd call it. But again, in Germany, that meant they had studied theology, philosophy, biblical language and stuff exclusively for 4 years. It's a different kind of degree, than the U.S. has. Obviously more like we'd think of British or German degree today. Every one of them had served at least 1 year in a associate pastor kind of role. Every one of them had already taken an entering test to be ordained. And so what the seminary was at this stage would be helping them know more how to be a pastor, how to live in community, and to be a brother to other pastors. And his pastors had all committed to the confessing church, which was really an outcast church movement at the time. So what you see here is preparation, commitment, buy-in by the churches. So based on your last question, it'd be more like a full-grown Moody Bible graduate who had studied 4 full years, who had interned in a church, who had spent some time the church buying in. And then they would come to such a community where they would learn to be a fellow pastor, a brother in Christ, to be around teachers who would share their lives with them and who were practitioners themselves, and to send them out. So that would be some of the difference. The privations they endured were real, particularly for what they were used to. They were not worse than some of the places I've seen students studying around the world today. I think it's awfully hard to have a faculty member of the quality of Bonhoeffer, but I think we have people who are willing and ready to love and serve and live with students. And that's the last thing. They lived in community, whereas most of our seminaries, many of our seminaries no longer do that. And some of them are basically commuter-driven places.
Dr. House, are there any of these differences that you've noted in Bonhoeffer's seminary that you would perhaps ask seminaries today to consider?
Yes, I go over one of these in the book, which is I don't believe we ought to have just open enrollment seminaries, which is what we have. Virtually anybody who wishes to come can come. I think we have to be more careful in who we send. And not because we get lots of bad people who are, living disreputable lives, but because we get good Christians who are well-meaning, who should be spending this time in their actual vocation. And so I think we ought to make sure that the people who are coming really need to be there. And I don't think we can afford financially to do anything other than that either. And so I want students who are really committed, not who might think I would take an online course or two to see if I want to go into this. We need to invest in people who really do want to be in ministry, however best we figure that out in our different denominational contexts. Because the best students we get today are as good as we've ever gotten. And so I would say the second thing is, are our faculty members committed to being pastor, teacher, scholars? This is not we shouldn't be entering seminary teaching as an academic career because it's the highest level at which we could teach and so forth. It may be that for us, but the question is, do I follow Bonhoeffer's lead in saying it will be very rigorous to care for students, to teach them God's ways, to care about them in their daily lives, and to continue to pursue scholarly tracks? He found it very difficult. I won't hesitate to say that. But it's that kind of faculty, not someone who thinks their obligation to the students is discharged once they've delivered a lecture. Mm-hmm. I would also think the spirit of the confessing church that supported Bonhoeffer seminaries and seminarians, who helped them have the best place they could, even though it wasn't great, who helped fund them and feed them and care for them. We need that spirit, rather than, well, let's set up an institution like a business and we'll figure out however many students can pay for what we have on offer. Rather, we ought to reverse it more like a church. How do we provide, as a congregation of God's people, ministers who then, we may have some cost recovery, but the idea is we have the ministers and people in the ministry, and then as opposed to figuring out how we can sell it to enough students to pay for it.
Dr. House, in your book, Bonhoeffer's Seminary Vision, a Case for Costly Discipleship and Life Together, you speak a number of times about incarnational seminaries. What is it that you mean when you speak of an incarnational seminary?
Well, I think my best definition of incarnational is on page 185, which an incarnational seminary requires persons shaping persons in face-to-face context. Now, it needs to be the appropriate persons, like we've been saying. We want faculty who are going to care about shaping, and they want to spend time with students. Not only that, we want students who want to spend time with other students and shape one another. That's one of the untold stories of seminary life, which is how much our friendships and our relationships with other students gets lost if we don't have them. And so, for instance, at Beeson, we do have mentoring groups where 8 or 9 students meet with us every 10 times a semester. And as a matter of fact, we've been committed to one another, to pray for one another, to help one another. I've seen students take up collections to fix a student's car. You don't soon forget that if you're in ministry and wonder if you're by yourself, and so forth. So the student-on-student contact may well be as important as the student and professor's contact. And not only that, we've had staff members. How your admissions office tells the truth and works with integrity and follows up on people matters. Whether or not your donors know and trust your Christian fundraisers, I think matters. But person to person is incarnational. Our Dean Timothy George has said in personal conversation to me, God sent his son, not a video. And so there are those who say, well, God couldn't send a video, it hadn't been invented. I think we're I think we're forgetting the point. He took the slow measure of sending his son, who took the slow measure of spending most of his time preparing 11 people to be in ministry, and it seems to have worked. It's worked out well for me, I could say, as a Gentile Christian living in a different century. So face to face, I mean, are we committed to sharing our lives with one another so that ministry can be done sharing our lives with one another?
Dr. House, that's a powerful statement. God sent his son, not a video. Seminaries today are increasingly looking to online classes, perhaps as a way of redressing insolvency. But you make it clear in your book that you believe this is probably a mistake. Can the internet be used to foster exemplary theological education?
I think it's a mistake. First of all, because we forget the pattern of Jesus. Our primary goal, our primary emphasis, our primary funding goals, our primary fundraising goals needs to be, how can we get people to people? So I think if what we're saying is we want to go completely online and we want that to save our program, then we've forgotten the focus. The focus is to shape people the way the scriptures would teach us, not to have our institutions survive. So I think we need to get that straight. I am for whatever emergency measures we need to take to help people who have no other option. So I'm very happy. For instance, my friend Bill Mounts has biblicaltraining.org. But anybody with a web can get free, excellent lectures and certificate programs and this sort of thing. I'm happy for that. I think in countries where the government actually allows the internet to flow like that, B, where they actually have those resources, and C, where there aren't people that we can and a way to get the people to them, I don't mind emergency measures. What I do mind is an American institution who has no emergency, using emergency needs as a pretense or a pretext for offering to Americans who have no emergency needs online credits at usually raised per credit cost. So on the one hand, I'm saying I have to have this online material because I have somebody in, say, Thailand who needs it. And instead of producing as a ministry and helping Thailand to have that, or having them listen to Bill Mounts' organization and giving them credits, instead we want to sell that for credit mainly to students managing their curriculum in the United States. So I know people say this often, and I don't even know if they stop to think, but is that what we're doing? Or is what we're actually doing using this as a reason to go ahead and sell credits at $500 an hour instead of $400 to American students who want the convenience? Now, I would also say we need some seminaries in the United States where we don't have them, and I mean them as smaller outfits, more like Bonhoeffer's, than say some of our large and I'd say even our large helpful seminaries. We can't afford to plant something large probably in Idaho, but what we really could use is a Bonhoeffer style 30 students, 2 or 3 teachers, an affordable place, and so forth. And I think we'll have a bunch of them in the next 15 years or so.
Dr. House, thank you for that. Dr. House, it seems that what is missing in a lot of our seminary education today, whether it be the online form or the traditional seminary classroom, is precisely the influence of the church. What is the role of the church in fostering theological education?
Yes, again, let's start with the people. We need pastors and people who value and love to see people going into vocational ministry. I've known a lot of parents through the years who did not want, they were Christian parents, and they did not want their children going into ministry for a variety of reasons. I've known pastors who seemed a little reticent about encouraging young people to go into vocational ministry. I think we need that to change. So we need pastors, parents, spouses to say, yes, we believe in this vocation. We love it. We want to see it flourish. Second, then the churches need to be identifying people and not just voting to send them to seminary, but again, testing them and giving them responsibility and helping them to see whether this is a good idea or not for them, and really investing. And then, as many denominations still do, what's your financial commitment to this person? These are our people we're sending. And we're not sending them out as exploring 18-year-olds to a state university. We are sending them out as our people that we are standing behind to hope they'll be blessing us or someone else in the long term. And so I think with that kind of investment, plus they should have confidence that the seminary teachers are church people too, who would have a similar commitment, and that they're not just taking people to lecture to for finance, for their own careers. And so I think then the churches need to help local seminaries, hopefully that they trust, by providing good church homes and good church service opportunities. One of the hardest things that still is to find in any place is good local church pastors who want to mentor students, not just fill out the paperwork to say, yes, they were around or give them some work to do, but to actually mentor them. And I'm glad to see several pastors who are taking up that role in our area. And then to receive them back. But the churches need to understand, if what you've done is send somebody off and told them figure out how to pay for it, and we'll see if anybody will give you a job when it's over, don't be surprised that they treat you differently than if you invested in them like family. They may see themselves as a consultant, as a religious person who's got a skill to sell. They will not treat you like family. I hope they'll treat you like family, though you did not treat them like family.
Dr. House, I recently returned from the Global Proclamation Congress for Pastoral Trainers in Bangkok that was hosted by the Ramesh Richards Evangelism and Church Health Organization. And the major objective of the Congress was to seek ways to bridge the divide between the formal institutions of theological education and the non-formal forms of theological education. In your view, what is it that we can do to continue to work to bridge this divide?
Well, I think it's a great objective, and I think it needs to be done, because we don't know what so-called formal theological education is going to look like in this country, and it looks very different today than it did 60 years ago. But I would say, first of all, we need to have seminary teachers who are happy to teach in as formal a place as I do, but also in the churches, and who are happy to go to places and teach pastors. There isn't a sense in which, people who hold endowed professorships or tenure or whatever should feel like it's not their job or anything to help teach. I think also we have to recognize that we have a lot of people who would do well in other parts of the world. They have a strong MDiv degree or strong THM. I don't believe everybody has to have a PhD to teach a good, solid seminary course in a lot of places. And I'm not saying that to be paternalistic. It wasn't that long ago that United States seminaries would not have had all those PhDs. It's a good thing to have, but it's not absolutely essential for good education, for good pastoral formation. And so I think we need to do that. And I think we ought to spend as much time as we can, say, if you go over, are you investing in someone who's going to teach? Whatever their needs are, how are you going to help them? Are you sitting with 5 people who are going to teach and resourcing them? So let's maximize our time to help others. And are we bringing them over to teach us about what it's like where they are and how they're helping? But I would urge 3,000 educators like this to ask themselves, how did it come about that they are so committed? Did it come about because 40 years ago someone was able to give them an audio tape? Was it because 30 years ago someone gave them a VCR tape? Or was it that somebody invested them and so put it into their hearts that this is what they're doing? I know it seems slow when the needs are massive, but I want to remind them of God's patience. I really believe if we have the right students, this is Jesus' point, the right 11 students can do quite a lot. So let's remember how we got here. Let's remember that 20 years ago, you wouldn't have had those 3,000. Let's see the exponential quality growth, believe in that, and keep at it. I mean, it's well done. I'm grateful for what's happened. One factor of age is I can remember that we've been this way before as far as video teaching. And I also can think what extraordinary things have been done in the last 20 or 30 years. What I think online can do, which you asked me, it can serve as a great tool, kind of a super textbook in a way. It just can't replace a teacher who's supposed to be passing on the gift of Christian wisdom, the gift of Christian love, the gift the Holy Spirit gave pastors and teachers to the church. But I would say we have better tools today than we've ever had. I've been reading a lot about William Tyndale lately. He would have been flabbergasted and delighted at all the options we have now. So I don't want to gainsay that. But let's remember those are great tools. Don't replace people.
Dr. House, I'm fascinated by your work, Bonhoeffer's Seminary Vision, and to my ears, it seems to be one of several voices speaking of an anticipated crisis in evangelical theological education. Am I hearing you rightly? Do you anticipate a crisis in evangelical theological education, and what would the signs of this crisis be?
Yeah, I think we're always in a post-Genesis 3 world susceptible to some sort of crisis. We know that we have enough sins and mistakes of our own. We also know we have an enemy, Satan, who doesn't want any of this to succeed. But we have Christ, we have the Scriptures, we have the Spirit to guide us, and so I'm optimistic. But my fear is this: that if, again, back to focus, are we trying to help an institution survive? And if so, why? Shouldn't we be saying, how do we want first rate, however that looks in a local place, the best theological preparation we can give to form pastors? Now that's the priority. So how do we then make arrangements for that to occur? I think we went through a generation of evangelical seminary life in which we were trying to, well, frankly, get set up in a viable, ongoing way. Accreditation helped us with that, because in the old days, accreditation said, do you have qualified faculty? Do you have a building or some place where this can keep going? Will you be up and running 3 years from now if somebody comes to your school? That was one phase. Well, we've now come into another phase in which there are other goals, but I think we've now entered into a phase that is causing crisis all over the country, not just in seminary education, but for a lot of secular educators. And it is, will you provide a place for where every 18 to 24-year-old can go because there's no employment for them? Check the employment statistics, and they're the highest of all categories, 18 to 24 or 5. Will you give them the skills that will give them a job? Will you sell them the credits that they need? If you don't, well, then the government accredits the accreditors. And that's how you get access to government student loans. Now, I'm not decrying that whole situation. There are some universities, and college seminaries maybe who don't take those funds. I'm not decrying that situation. I'm decrying the idea that a bigger and bigger and bigger seminary is of necessity better, and that the bigger we get, the higher finances we can get, the more people we can affect, and so forth. Jesus picked the 11 out of the 5,000. He didn't try to do everything with 5,000. So I think we need to get back to basics and to say we are not here to have an increasing number of enrollees. We are here to educate and form the people the churches have identified as people who need to be taken in by Christian brothers and sisters and helped into the ministry. Ohio State University does not be judged by whether it has 40 or 50 or 60 or 100,000 students. it needs to be judged on whether it's helping people to learn how to think, grow, and develop in a fast-changing economy. So I think it's a crisis in education that's built on what Wendell Berry called the industrial educational model, that says outputs and quantities matter most. However you get to that end is a fine enough means. And we all know that that means we're going to leave quality out. Some people say, well, what we need to do then is get cheaper junior colleges. I'm all for that, but they need to be high quality, or who's going to hire a low quality graduate? So in the end, what I'm trying to say, the crisis is in education. Evangelicals are in American education, and we need to wake up to say, let's get back to the first principles that we have. We can fund that. We can fund that even if accreditation is pulled. But the idea that 3,000 students at a seminary is of necessity and by definition more effective and better for the kingdom than 200 is a principle that simply cannot be proved biblically. I hope all 3,000 at whatever seminary it is all should be there and they're going to do great things. That's possible, and I hope it's true. But by definition, we don't know that that's more significant than what you're doing in Spokane today.
Dr. House, I'm very grateful for your time and reflections. And if I can close with a question that I've been asking all of the guests on this program, and that is this: what would it mean for the church today to be united? How would we recognize this unity, and what is it that we can do today to pursue Christian unity?
It's really a matter of living out who we are, isn't it? We are one in Christ. We all share the Holy Spirit. We are family. It'd be nice for us to remember that and realize it. We start there, that you and I are already brothers in Christ, and that's a good thing. I believe, as Bonhoeffer did, he had Lutheran students and he had Reformed students in the seminary. The confessing church was not a single denomination entity. They'd come to see too that, when you're up against the forces of evil, which we are whether we know it or not, these are our brothers and sisters, and we need to discuss sacraments, but we're not going to divide over them. That's what he was trying to say, Lutheran and Reform. I think we ought to cooperate everywhere we can together. So if we say we're brothers, that means we need to cooperate everywhere we can and cut out the few places we can't, rather than saying, well, we have differences, we will never then cooperate. So I end up saying, however I can help. At Beeson Divinity School, we're interdenominational. We talk a lot about not being non-denominational, but being interdenominational. So do I care about how the Presbyterian Church USA, Presbyterian Church in America, the Anglican Communion, do I care about how the Baptist churches are doing? Is that a matter of my concern, or am I just over in my box? Well, I think we have to cooperate everywhere we can, and sometimes on a token basis. I was talking to a Baptist pastor yesterday who's ready to lead his church to give at least a token amount of money to some non-Baptist mission boards, in the spirit of the Apostle Paul taking up that collection for Jerusalem. So I think today, locally, where you live, how can you show brotherhood with another Christian? Where can you cooperate, even if you're not going to be able to cooperate on everything?
We've been very privileged to be speaking with Dr. Paul House, past president of the Evangelical Theological Society, currently professor of Old Testament at Beeson Divinity School, and author of the text that we've been discussing, Bonhoeffer Seminary Vision, A Case for Costly Discipleship and Life Together. Thank you so much for being with us, sir.
Thank you. I appreciate it very much.